Your brother is a retard and will never be a normal kid. I stood there feeling temporarily paralyzed, allowing the harsh words to slowly sink into my mind. I was only a fun and loving first grader who wanted to run wildly on the playground and hold as many girls' hands as possible. In that line, though, one word stood out to me. A word that I'd heard before, but a word that I had never truly understood the meaning of. Retard. The word was cold and piercing, leaving my body in a kind of physical discomfort that I had never experienced before. My teeth grinded against each other, my cheeks red as could be, and my body covered in goosebumps from head to toe. It wasn't the word itself that infuriated me, but rather the tone of the comment that got under my skin. It felt as if the comment was directed right at me. I lost complete control of my body. I jumped on the kid and repeatedly pummeled him until my dad had to forcefully pull me off. In the car ride home, I sat quietly to myself, replaying the line in my head over and over and over again. I knew that my brother Dylan was different and unique, as my parents had always explained to me, but for the first time in my life, I felt ashamed and embarrassed for having a retarded brother. When you look at Dylan, you know that he's different. When you listen to Dylan speak, you know that he's different. If you watch the way that Dylan acts or how he moves around, you know that he's different. This is because at birth, Dylan was born with global apraxia and dyspraxia. These two disabilities affect his gross motoring skills, which are responsible for walking, running, jumping, or really any other physical activity, as well as his fine motoring skills, which are responsible for his speech and communication. You see, these disabilities cannot be grown out of. For example, if an NBA basketball player tears his ACL, they're forced to be sidelined for 6 months to a year. During that time, they can recover and get back to being the best player that they can possibly be. That's not the case for Dylan. Dylan will never be a typical kid. He will always have these disabilities, and they will forever be a part of him. It took me a long time to accept and love Dylan for who he truly is. Now you might be thinking to yourself, how horrible of a person I am for not being able to accept and love my brother for who he truly is, which I understand. What you don't understand is that living with Dylan is no easy task. Quite frankly, it's the hardest thing that I've ever had to live with in my 17 years of life. After the incident with the boy who called Dylan a retard, that memory subconsciously scarred me, affecting the way that I looked and felt about my brother Dylan. I was embarrassed to have Dylan as my brother. Embarrassed to walk around with him on the street because we would always receive judgmental stares from clueless strangers. Embarrassed to have friends over to the house because I was afraid of how they would react, whether they would freak out or just be uncomfortable. Embarrassed to bring Dylan to sports activities or really whatever it may be because I was afraid of how people would view me. This embarrassment ultimately led to a buildup of frustration that I took out on Dylan. Constant fighting between the two of us because we always had trouble seeing eye to eye with one another. But I'm honestly happy that I've experienced this feeling with Dylan because it has led me to some very valuable lessons as well as life-changing realizations. After years of struggling with Dylan, I've come to love and accept him. I've come to love him for his differences and accept him for what he is capable of, regardless of anyone else's opinion. Dylan is one of the most incredible people that I've ever met in my entire life, and my relationship with Dylan is special and something that I will cherish for my entire life. Dylan has the biggest heart out of anyone that I've ever met, and has a contagious smile that might seem a little strange to people that don't know him, but when I see it, it instantly puts a smile on my face. I guess I'm making it seem as if Dylan's disabilities inhibit him from living this so-called typical and happy life, but that is far from the case. Dylan just started a new school in Boston called Cardinal Cushing, where he does homework, he goes to class, he rides his bike, he plays sports, he hangs out with his friends and his girlfriend, and he does other regular day-to-day activities just like each and every one of you. Dylan's differences do not define him as a person. I'm going to say that again because it's extremely important. Dylan's disabilities and differences do not define him as a person. However, the problem in our society today is that people are so quick to judge So quick to judge and paint this picture of an individual based on their differences. 15% of the world, 15% of the world, 15% of the people in the world struggle with some sort of disability that affect them in one way or another. That's a little more than 1 billion people, 1/7 of our world population. There is this imaginary bubble that restricts people from engaging with people in the special needs community. In my opinion, that is extremely problematic, and that bubble needs to be popped. I encourage each and every one of you to not only attempt to accept and engage with people in the special needs community, but to accept and embrace what makes you different. Dylan is no retard. Dylan is a joyful, humorous, kind and loving human being. He's a kind and loving human being who is capable of so much. So if I had the opportunity to go back and experience what happened with the boy who called Dylan a retard, what would I do? Would I be embarrassed? Would I lose my cool and take my anger out? Would I be scarred again? The answer to those questions are no. I wouldn't be embarrassed. I wouldn't be scarred, and I wouldn't be frustrated. I would want to explain to the boy what Dylan is capable of, that he has no limitations. I would want the boy to see Dylan for who he truly is and what he is truly capable of, because Dylan's differences do not define him as a person. Thank you.